should be live. It says we're live in the top left-hand corner, so we should be live on LinkedIn, or we're all talking to ourselves. But either way, it's going to be an awesome discussion today. So if you are tuning in and you are watching, please do drop a comment into the comments below on the event, so that we can actually know if there are people out there listening. So maybe tell us where you're from, introduce your name, do a little bit of networking in the comments, because what I'll be able to do as well, which is important, because when we have people's viewpoints and people's questions, I'll be able to show it on the screen a little bit like this. So if you've got a question for the panel as we go through, or you find any points that resonate, drop a little comment into the chat, and I'll show it up, and we can either fire it to one of the panelists, or I can just share your pearls of wisdom that you shop in. But before we start everything, I'm going to do a few introductions. So today we are talking about how we bridge the loyalty gap through proactive outreach. And to help me tackle that debate, I've got James Adamczuk. Am I saying that right, James?
That's a strong 9.5 out of 10 there, Gary. I'll take it.
And we've got Bruce Skjolde. Am I saying that
yes,
right, Bruce?
You got it right. You got it right.
There we go. I did my research to join us. So I'm going to ask both of my guests to give themselves an intro, tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do, what your specialisms are, and then we'll launch into the panel questions that I've got. But we'll start with yourself, James. So introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you very much, Gary. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invite. Great to be spending time with yourself and Bruce today. My name's James Adamczuk. I've got a great job title, which is CX Evangelist at Zoom, which is quite cool. And I've been at Zoom for almost 3 years now, and seen a very exciting journey of how Zoom was kind of approached the customer experience space, which is just remarkable. But my background's actually from the customer side. So previously to joining Zoom, I spent quite a significant amount of my career in financial services, digital transformation, contact center, and that's what I absolutely love. I absolutely love it. And for me, doing this role at Zoom, oh man, it's quality. So yeah, I'm really fortunate, and it's great to be in a company that's wanting to innovate and have some different answers. So it's right on my boat. Perfect.
Brilliant. Well, I can tell we're going to have a really enthusiastic conversation today already. Bruce, tell anybody who's listening and watching a little bit about yourself.
Well, I mean, it's hard to follow that, so thanks, James. So I have to kind of up the energy level. But my name's Bruce Skjolde, so I look after EMEA for Alvaria. I have about 10 years experience in the customer experience industry. I've been at Alvaria 3.5 years now. Despite my title, my focus, my passion is getting in front of customers, is really talking about the challenges, and also working with our alliance partners. Just as in the time that I've been at Alvaria, we've gone through a couple of iterations, and I believe where we are now is the true kind of form of Alvaria, which is focused on that proactive, compliant outreach, and we're really starting to see the difference that makes within within our customers and their customers' experiences. And I think a testament to this is the partnership that we have with Zoom, where we're working together with one of the movers and shakers within the industry, who have seen the value of our product and how we can embed it within their platform to provide, a full end-to-end, a customer experience platform.
Brilliant. Well, again, thank you both very much for coming under the spotlight for this. I'm going to fire some particularly challenging questions at you and put it all to the test around what we actually need to do, I suppose, to shift the customer satisfaction levels within the UK, within the US. They're both playing in around the 76, 77, 78% mark at the moment, and that has a direct impact on customer loyalty, customer retention. And I think we've been in this age over the last 10 years where technology is getting better. AI is on the horizon. It's been embedded into many more customer journeys, but we aren't necessarily seeing the advancements and the improvements in customer satisfaction. So I thought it would be useful today to kind of really have a deeper look into how we can potentially use technology and use proactive communication to address some of that customer satisfaction dip, some of that loyalty divide, and see where we go. So I've got a few questions that I prepared in advance. So I'm going to start off with thinking about proactive outreach as a bit more of a loyalty driver, James. And I'm going to start with you and ask why why do you think proactive outreach in today's loyalty landscape is important, and why or what are most businesses missing the mark when it comes to proactive communication with their customer base?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And there's kind of like a subtle irony to all of this, is that we kind of obsess about, and I'm guilty as charged, mea culpa, folks, kind of obsess about this on inbound journeys. We obsess around building customer data platforms, CRM, information, insights, actionable analytics, with that real focus on inbound and capturing customer intent. But the kind of like missed opportunity here, or something that we're going to talk about today, the gold dust, the kind of next level bit of your organization, is turning that model on its head, where you as a business own the intent, if you will, and the data around what your customers are doing, and you're using that in a different approach to drive that loyalty and value. So we know about what our customers are purchasing. We spend a lot of money on digital channel optimization with cookies and information, and goodness knows what else out there, and Google paid search. But the fact that we can bring this stuff together and use it with a proactive outreach representing my brand is a massive, massive opportunity. And again, you talk about AI, Gary, and how that can help bring this to life. All we're doing here really is wanting AI to augment it, because we've got the data. It's almost like that reverse customer journey mapping. And I find that really, really interesting, because it's easy to do it inbound, but outbound is a different use case, but you could even argue more valuable. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, and something that, yeah, mea culpa, 80-20, you just assume it inbound, but outbound is massive.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting you talk about customer journeys, because we were chatting about those yesterday, and we tend to clearly define the inbound customer journeys, but we don't really explore or identify outbound customer journeys that can add a little bit of extra friction into the mix that can actually have a really positive result. And I think, Bruce, we chatted about this yesterday, and I think we obviously think proactive outreach is a key part of driving customer experience. But what is it, do you think, or why is it that you think businesses might be missing the mark?
So I think this is something that we've been delving into for over the last year, and as James said, there's so much focus on servicing the inbound, is that we're not focusing on understanding what that full customer journey looks like. Now, as consumers, if we think about all the people that we work, or all the providers that we work with, how much brand loyalty do we have? I can't think of any of my providers that I have brand loyalty with. So there is certainly an opportunity for, with the data, as James said, with the data and the insight that we have on the customer, it's about meeting the customer at a time of their choice, in a channel of their choice, but with relevant information. So just an example, if you've got, like a car, your car insurance renewal coming up, and you can see that you've either added another car, or, added another car to it, you don't drive the miles that that is in your policy. It's about, right, how do we reach out? Now, it doesn't have to be a call, because not many people answer calls these days, but it is a very well sort of thought out outreach campaign that you can then use to show that, look, we understand you as an individual, where you are in the journey, and we want to add value. So outreach for the sake of outreach, I think, is pointless, but outreach which fundamentally adds value to me as a consumer is what is missing. Because then I'm like, right, you understand where I am, you understand, I believe that you see value in me as a customer, and by you reaching out to me in a channel of my choice, at the time of my choice, is something that builds brand loyalty, and that has loads of spin-offs, right? So you've got your customer retention, and I know we'll get to this later, but the value, I think, associated with that has an impact on the amount of inbound that you'll get. has a, you know, so the impacts are very, very big for an organization, for, you know, for something which in theory is very simple, but not many people are doing it.
Yeah, and you know what, I think we've chatted about this before, is that people quite often see outbound as an additional cost, but they don't necessarily think of the benefits or the downstream benefits of actually being proactive with your outbound. Can reduce your complaints, it can reduce your inbound, it can deflect demand in general, so it can have a more positive impact on the bottom line. And I think for those that are seeing it as a cost, Bruce, what would you say to them to maybe convince them to maybe invest more in a proactive outreach campaign?
So there's a couple of ways that we approach it. One, with hard customer data. So we've got a customer in the UK, very large customer, who employed a very targeted outreach campaign focused around customer renewals, etc. And they were able to directly correlate the reduction of 30% on their inbound, right? Wow. So you can immediately see that this is reducing operational cost, but then they also increase their retention rates. They also increase cross-sell, upsell. We've got another customer who's a retailer who has mapped out, and I think this is what's missing. People map out the inbound journeys as James said, but they don't map out what an outbound journey could look like. Yeah. So you've got to have that end to end. So we've got a retailer who, I think with 250 agents, attributes £30 million a year in profit to their campaign. And what they do is when somebody buys something, they immediately get a contact saying, thank you for thank you for choosing us. Then if their maintenance is coming up, they contact them and say, would you like to extend it? That, you know, these are the options available to them. So it's their largest store. They've got a couple hundred stores, but these 250 agents are their largest and biggest revenue generating stores. So, you know, you talk about cost associated. I actually see inbound as a cost center, because you've got fixed costs to service customers, and outbound as a profit center, because if you think of the elements that are in, let's call it outreach, you've got proactive customer outreach, which is customer retention, which is CSAT, which is, and perhaps an opportunity for cross or upsell, so that falls kind of into the sales, and then there's the collections side, which we don't necessarily like to talk about because it's a very sensitive subject. But you know, since I've been working with yourselves and a lot of the other people who've done this, who've lived this for like 20, 30 years, and some of the biggest financial institutions, you change the narrative. It's about like, how do we assist with financial management? How do we identify earlier in the cycle that someone might default, and then how do you contact them in a way that's non-intrusive to say, look, we're not here to chase you for debt. We're here because we want to assist you manage your finances. So it's all around understanding, again, you know, where your customers are, vulnerability, all the different elements that we've got the data points on. So I know with Zoom, like, you know, the more that we work with Zoom, I see how awesome that platform is, and all the different data points that you can gather and use that to inform, you know, a very thoughtful and targeted outreach strategy. That's driving profit. That's driving, you know, top line rather than consuming costs. So, you know, it costs, I think, 3 times less to service an outbound channel than it does to service an inbound channel. So I think, you know, when you actually delve into the detail, people are nervous about the connotations of outbound, but it's not outbound, because people just think of it as nuisance calls.
You just think of it as cold outreach acquisition, don't they? And
exactly.
And Jay, you had a massive smile on your face as Bruce was talking there. I was just wondering, do you agree there? Do you think there's any additional points?
I completely agree. And you know what? The reason I smiled was I actually remembered that I renewed my mobile phone contract on an outbound outreach, which is probably really unusual for me, to be quite honest with you, especially given that I work in the industry. And this is probably about 12, 14 months ago now. And I was so delighted that it was a personalised outreach, where obviously there'd been a bit of legwork there in the background, the data, and a personable agent who understood needs. It wasn't even a hard sell. It was just a nice conversation that was kind of like started with some emails about contract. I didn't even expect it, but it was like great outbound service. And if I'm getting great outbound service, Of course, people have got a profit and loss to run with, as to Bruce's point. But if I'm getting that culture of care, whether that's on a financial services call or a contract renewal or whatever it might be, interest being seen on a sales journey of a conversion type of journey, if I've got my people who know what they're doing, and that we can go into the whole piece around agent assistance and why Zoom, Alvaria are pretty superpower at this together, and my data correct and meeting the customer where they want to be met. That's you're 90% of the way there. People might be too busy, but previously where you might have got a deflection or people not even picking up or ignoring the call, I think there's an opportunity here to really use a lot of the tools that we take for granted on inbound on outbound journeys as well. And it's back to that journey mapping. 100%.
Thinking about,
I really love something
Bruce.
you said there, which is this culture of care. Absolutely love that, because it's like, if you think, and I've had an experience recently with my utility provider where they sent me a bill which was ridiculous, and it took 3 hours, a lot of frustration, a lot of back and forth, and then it still wasn't sorted out. But if you pick up in that journey, because you can clearly pick up, the sentiment, the satisfaction, it wasn't like it was escalated to complaints. That should then automatically just trigger an outbound saying, look, we understand that you've had obviously a challenge and would like to assist you. And if you have that, again, culture of care, I love it. I'm absolutely going to steal it. Sorry, Gary.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the point that you're making there, I think is a really valid one, Bruce, because I think the more the regulator, so FCA in our world, becomes more stringent in what their expectations of firms are, and when you look at the consumer duty principles around providing a much more comprehensive level of customer support, providing assurances that customers understand the product, providing assurances that clients or customers have a clear understanding of their pricing and the product, I think it feeds into a more proactive contact strategy in its entirety in terms of understanding that. And I think when we look at how we then segment customers as part of that, and to meet some of those regulatory needs, we have to really think about what the segmentation strategy is. So James, I'm going to start with you as the CX evangelist in the group, and ask you in terms of what are some of the most effective ways that you've seen clients maybe segmenting their customer base to engineer that more proactive approach and that improvement in CX.
Yeah, it's a multitude of data points, Gary. To be quite honest with you, traditional segmentation, which could even stretch as far as customer lifetime value, that's almost like become a vanity metric now. When in fact you need to be. There's so much people, and I'm not, rightfully so. C-level community that we work with day in day out are investing heavily within CRM, customer data platform, and obsessing over how we can understand what our customers are actually doing. And with that multitude of data points, that's where your segmentation is. So I can look, by all means, take the vanity metrics and the old school metrics, but there's so much more nuanced things that you can use to drive that segmentation. And 100%, that is why I renewed with my service provider, because it was absolutely, literally on the money, absolutely amazing. So that's where segmentation is. You can't just go, we've got gold, silver, bronze. Even my previous employers, when we have Premier and different levels of accounts, there's no value in it. It's just a financial number. You earn X, you get
There's
this.
No value in it if you don't do anything different with that segmentation.
Correct. Exactly. And you think it's just that, and it isn't just that. There's so much more to it than that.
And I think the key thing is that you can have as many segmentations as you want. It's kind of irrelevant because it's data for the having the sake of data, right? Which in my mind is pointless. But
it's actionable. Yes.
It is then the outreach campaigns or the way that you service those segments that's important, because you can't just say, right, like you say, you've got gold, silver, bronze, you phone this and that's that doesn't work anymore, right? Because not everybody falls into that bucket, because people will be in different points of the lifestyle of the life cycle. And I think also what is important is ensuring that you have the agents with the right skill, with the right fit to make you know, that kind of outreach. Like you say, the guy who phoned you for your mobile contract clearly was skilled, trained, and had the right information to be able to do that. So, you know, whilst we're talking about the customers, we mustn't forget about the agents. It's about empowering the agents with the right information to be able to resonate with a customer when you get through, because being able to contact a customer in itself is very valuable. To get somebody's time in the busy day and age that we live in, when you get when you get that person's time, you need to make full use of it. And you know, if there's gaps, if the customer has perhaps tried to contact before and the agent doesn't have all the full view of the customer, full 360, they could miss something, because they could be phoning a customer for, you know, it's an upsell, cross sell, but they've got a frustrated customer and it's not going to land well. So, you know, and that's something that Alvaria has done for years. It's like taking that segmentation and applying a particular outreach campaign, which is an automated campaign, but which is then linked to the right agents who have the right information to make that interaction count.
And you know what, I've seen some of that done really well, and I think that with some of the way that regulation is going, I think I'm seeing more organizations and more firms starting to implement welcome call strategies, more firms implementing more closed loop feedback, so proactive outbound on things that they've identified, and then just general service recovery from some of the stuff that you're talking about there, Bruce, where they've identified some potential negative sentiment and they feed that into a cadence to say, right, go and speak to this customer because we've identified something wasn't quite right. And they're closing the loop on that. So it provides that value, it provides that reassurance. And to your point, James, it's a nice surprising call that they weren't expecting from a conversation that they might have been disenfranchised with and dissatisfied with, that we can then turn around and have that opportunity.
And I think the key thing though is that we talk about calls. I think we should talk about them as engagements, because it might be you call, they don't answer, it could be an SMS, it could be an email, but it is targeted, it's personalized, and again, it goes back to meeting the customer in the channel of their choice at the time of their choice. So, you know, people, you know, we all talk about it. I'm guilty of it as well. When you talk about a call, but it's an interaction, it's an engagement, and it's the ability to orchestrate that across channels so that you've got a consistent experience, that you're getting the message across. And you know, the customer might respond to an email and agree to a call or whatever it is, but it's then their customers agreed to the call at this time, ensuring that somebody does call them, so that immediately feeds into the list so that the right person is calling them at the time they've asked for. Because I think Martin, who's in the audience at the moment, shared with an anecdote with me, where he needed to have a smart meter and he was out for a run. Somebody contacted him, he answered, and he said, look, I'm out at the moment, can you call me at 5 o'clock, please? Nobody called him. He then had to go and contact his service provider and he had to go through the whole process. So it's again, it goes back to my point of, when you get that interaction with the customer, you need to make sure that you have the follow-up, that you have everything that goes with it, because otherwise then you've just created a negative experience. So what was a positive intent turns into a negative experience because you haven't followed up on what you said you're going to do.
And I want to touch on that point, because I think defining contact strategies in an omni-channel world can be quite a challenge. And I think we're balancing lots of different mediums, and we're trying to meet customers where they're at. So James, I'm going to come to you as the omni-channel CX evangelist in the room, and just think about, how do we define that contact strategy in a multi-channel environment? So how do we build a contact strategy that's relevant, effective, and aligns across all the channels, and does, to what Bruce says there, meets people where they're at?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question, and a very complex one to answer, to be quite frank with you. But again, it's back to, what do I actually know about my customers? What's their digital adoption? So, you know, if I'm a business that has a mobile app, can I get some information there about whether that's used, what the interaction is? Do I know if I'm spending a lot of money on non-voice channels? Does the customer interact with those non-voice channels, etc., etc.? So you're building that picture. And if we take an absolute extreme example of a video outreach, yes, we can do it. And I think it's absolutely amazing that we can do it. But where does it start? It starts with a non-voice conversation around something personalized to me, where maybe I want to connect with that business, that brand, via a video experience. And that's really powerful when you do it right. And of course, as we know, you've got the customer journey right. Bruce has made a great example there about being out for a run. I'm quite happy to talk to people if I'm interested. And a lot of people sat at home, multi-screening, checking top cashback and Martin Lewis and all this other stuff of like, the best deals out there, and data's being produced and all this. So I'm interested. I want to find out. I want to be informed and have an educated conversation with somebody. So I can take the components about what do I know about my customers, that propensity to buy, or people who, for example, are digitally engaged, or on the other extreme, a vulnerable customer. But it's back to really understanding how I'm going to connect and what I'm going to say. And again, absolutely empowering the agent and not leaving the agent high and dry with on an outbound campaign with no information. Well, hello, folks, you're not going to get very far there. But if I'm telling James or telling Bruce or telling Gary a beautiful AI summary of who this customer is in 100 characters or 100 words or whatever, and I'm outreaching on the channel of that customer's choice with the ability to be able to use assistants to help guide the agent so they're empowered and have that foundation, I'm going to start delivering my brand. And this is the thing where we have to have all these constituent points together. So yeah, I kind of answered it in a roundabout way, but you have the data. It's like, use it. Do you know what I mean? And like to Bruce's point, you're going to create a profit center pretty quickly and start with seeing that churn come right down.
Yeah. And I think that's
and I think the key.
Oh, go on, Bruce. Build on that.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think the key point that you made there is the data points on the customer. We have so many data points on the customer, and if we don't use that to accurately inform any kind of outreach strategy that we have, and like you said, it's where are they in their journey? Where, like, if you've seen in a campaign and you've tried to call this customer 20 times, like over a 3-month period, they've not answered one call, but they respond to SMS. You need that should then just automatically default to the channel that they respond on, and it's having that again. It's having actionable insights, but actually actioning them, because too many people just go, right, we're just going to keep doing what we were always doing and then expecting a different result, which is, as we all know, the definition of madness. So I think it really is. I think we're at a unique point now where we have more data points on our customers than we've ever had in our entire life. We know if they've been on the website, that we know if they've got an abandoned cart. We've got the core analytics to understand if there's negative sentiment either on a call or in a WhatsApp exchange or a live chat exchange. So we need to make sure that when we're doing an omni-channel experience, or I like to just call it a channel-less experience, because it should all be consistent, is that it just, regardless of the channel, it needs to be a consistent experience. It needs to be a joined up experience. And whatever servicing that channel behind it needs to have the access to all the data, because I think we spoke about people investing in their CRMs and their other line of business systems, but if that doesn't feed into the agent, which then translates to the customer, you've got problems, right? What's the point of having all of this information, but if it's in silos, it really doesn't lead to any there's no benefit to it.
And you've touched on a piece that I was bringing to the table next, Bruce. So it's almost as if you've read my next question, and it's joining up that technology stack. I think a lot of organizations have legacy systems. Some might not be in the cloud, strangely for some. Some might be on premise. Some might have CRMs that they've either built in-house or they've bought in. So there is a jumbled up tech stack in there that needs to be navigated and needs to be explored. So when you're thinking about operating a proactive outreach campaign, how do we help organizations, contact centers join up that tech stack so that we don't get those silos between CRM, marketing, analytics, etc.? So I'll start with you there, Bruce, because I think you've probably got some good examples of clients that might have overcome that challenge, and then James will lead into yourself. So Bruce, what's your thoughts on that?
So there's a couple of different ways that we're looking at it, and with the evolution of AI and Gen AI and large language models, which feed off loads of different data within the organization, we're seeing that customers are starting to understand that they need to give, regardless of where the data sits, whether it be in silos. Now, you have ways that you can integrate APIs that typically takes a lot of work. AI start to revolutionize that, right? By using Gen AI, agents can then just type in the question, which then searches all the different data repositories and is then able to give the agent the information that they need to be able to make that call. But you can also then use that when you are building your outreach strategies. So you can use AI to inform what your outreach strategy looks like by collating all the information from the different line of business systems. So, if we're looking at a financial institution, is it, within CRM, or is debt collection, they'll have a debt collection system. They might have different systems that, you need to also understand that what has happened with the growth of multi-channel, omni-channel, or whatever digital channels, is that often the logic is in silos. That information doesn't always real time then translate or get updated into CRMs. And in a world where we need to be on top of, we need to know what a customer said 30 seconds ago, because they might be calling in, or you might get something to phone them. You need to be able to access it. So I think long answer to your short question is the customers are understanding this, and then they need to have the full customer 360. And I think AI is really accelerating that journey by simplifying the access to that information to be able to then empower the agents and also empower the customers. It's equally important, inbound or outbound, that you have the full, that you have the full profile, the full life cycle of that customer.
And James, how are you seeing contact centers navigate that kind of messy, jumbled up tech stack to become more proactive and to become more communicative with the customers?
Yeah, well, we kind of take the baton from Alvaria when that campaign's being built and being actioned. So when we're running the campaign and done all the things that Bruce has talked about, bringing all those constituent parts together, I need to make sure that I'm supporting my human in the loop. I mean, I'm a huge fan that this stuff is going to be long way. We're all good folks. AI is just going to augment all about that human in the loop and what that touch point looks like. So when I'm doing that, I'm able to, when I'm running the campaign, who am I talking to in an easy, digestible way? Information that's been collected from Alvaria about why that campaign's being run, who the customer is, a digestible view of what that 360-degree was. So last customer CSAT was this, last time they interacted was inbound on WhatsApp or whatever. Provide that information, and then the agent, with agent assistance, can then have that conversation. So if a successful conversation's underway, we're using the Zoom superpower of being able to take real-time information, real-time conversation, and be able to drive further insights, whether that's either with knowledge base or with a agent assistance type technology. And back to that journey map, what does great look like? Yeah. I know what if my customer's saying something with a certain sentiment, with a certain tone, we can take that and use it. And it's just giving you so much more control over the conversation and insights about how we can drive those good outcomes. So it's almost like Bruce builds an amazing outbound campaign. We can use Zoom to help execute with that campaign by having, really the agent completely engaged in that conversation and supported. Because if we're not again, I think I mentioned it earlier, we're not doing that, how can I confidently represent my brand and bring that to life? Because if I'm working for a large service provider or a bank on very difficult conversations, I want to feel supported. So that's what these tools do. And that's why we think with the Alvaria partnership, we're kind of onto something here.
Okay. Yeah, and I think just a bit to add to that is when the agent is engaged, is prompting them with that information, essentially the next best action.
Yeah.
Right. Based on the conversation path, where it's going, what is the next best action for you to do? Now that obviously provides a better experience for the customer. But if we go back to the agent side, if you're talking about, call centers bring in people, come in, they go out. So you want to make sure that your time to competency is as short as possible. And by providing that next best action, you'll have a script, but now AI is generating, right, what is the next best action based on the statement that the
all these
customer is
parameters, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, this is what you should say next. So you're supporting the agent. Whilst you don't want it to appear to be robotic, trust me, I know agents really appreciate the scripts. They appreciate that, because especially if we're in very sensitive conversations, if it's, you know, a very unhappy customer that they've been told to call, you know, for retention. So you're going to be dealing with a very frustrated customer who perhaps wants to cancel, or you contacting somebody around, you know, some kind of financial management. You need to make sure that they have the right information, and that
you build the human connection, because that's why I renewed. That's why, you know, you want to, and I spent a lot of time, just like you guys, on the floor in very, you know, with outbound teams with very difficult jobs, and you know, and we've got to support. That's our job.
Yeah,
To support
I think you said it right at the start, Bruce. Is that outbound is a differentiator for service now, and I think we're in a highly commoditized arena where people don't really have brand loyalty, as you mentioned. I think the outbound is going to be the main differentiator for loyalty and retention. But one of the things that I often hear when I'm speaking to people who are dabbling in outbound is they don't necessarily have the experience to be able to run a proactive outreach campaign safely. So there's lots of concerns around compliance and being able to proactively reach out right, and there's worry about fines and things from the regulator. So if the people out there that are considering using outbound contacts and considering doing a proactive outbound campaign, from your perspective, Bruce, what advice would you give them to remain compliant, so that they can safely engage customers without getting themselves into hot water? And what are some of the things that they maybe should keep an eye out for?
I think, you know, there's obviously, you know, there's the basic requirements, like the Ofcom requirements, that if you're doing predictive outreach and a customer answers, you need to connect the call in under 2 seconds, which again, if you look at the Alvaria, which was Aspect, Noble, Pedigree, that's where we come from. And that's why we've got the customer list that we've got, is because we have the guardrails in place that help you to address GDPR, FCA, Ofcom, all the other regulations. Is that as part of our outreach campaign, those guardrails are in place. So we've got a temp tracker. We've got, you know, understanding vulnerability. We've got, you know, the guidance, so that when you introduce yourself, you have to say why you're calling and do all the disclaimers and everything else. So we can track all of that. So, you know, for people who are looking to get, you know, to employ a you know, a proactive, predictive, compliant outreach, that's just out of the box for us. That's table stakes. It's something we've been doing for the last 15 years. It's why we are the leader in the compliant outbound space. And I think, again, the testament to that is the customer list that we have, and who have been customers of ours for like 10, 15 years, some of them even longer, because they don't have to worry about that we worry about that, right? So when they build it, it's all native to our platform. And then you might have, like in the US, for example, you've then got state-specific regulations. So you've got your national regulations. You've then got state-specific regulations. What time can you call? When can you, when shouldn't you call? So you can immediately build that into the campaign, so that when you feed that data in, it does the due diligence. It does, like, it vets it and goes, right, sorry, this is outside of compliance. You can't do it. So
do you think that's what maybe puts people off, though, is that they don't necessarily know what rules that they should be following?
Absolutely. And I think that is why we, when we engage with customers and they raise these concerns, we can go through, depending on the region that they are in, the legislative requirements that they need to be aware of, and how we as Alvaria address them, out of the box. So this is so the conversation typically goes, right, you're in the UK, GDPR, Ofcom, FCA, these are the main ones that you need to worry about, because these are the ones that have hefty fines attached to them, also brand damage, all of the associated consequences of breaching them. But this is how we address them, right? So natively out of the box, this is how it is, how we manage that. And then, further, as an organization, what else do you want to do, within your brand. So you know, if you're chasing someone from debt, you can only phone them, I think it's 7 times in 7 days or something like that. But you might not want to do that. So you might want to say it's like 3 times in 7 days. So again, that goes into the logic in the list when you're dialing. So, you know, we've got all of that information because we've had to build our product around it. So, and then we've got people like you, Gary, and we've got Martin, and we've got, you know, all the experts that we can bring in who've lived that, who've done it, and then are able to add further credibility and insight into why, you know, why that's important.
Yeah.
What's your views on that, James?
Yeah, I love this because this is resonating really well, especially with my financial services kind of hat on here. When I was working in that segment, we always said, but I always said, let's build as if we want to be. We want to have the auditor in. We should be proud that the auditor can come in and see that we've absolutely thought about this and it's real. It's not just rhetoric. Yeah. Auditing shouldn't be, okay, let's go and spruce things up a little bit and whatever, tell them what they want to hear. It should be, let's go, guys. We've really thought about this. We understand how important this channel is to our business and to our brand. And we absolutely can demonstrate how we go above and beyond what even the basics of what the what the Financial Conduct Authority is saying as an example. And what's even better now, is that we didn't have things like amazing quality management like we have now. I mean, Varian and all these guys have done a fantastic job, Zoom included as well. Like lots of people within the industry of how we can take a conversation and really process conversation. So if we look at this, like we want to be audited, understand, work with the experts, the people who understand what this channel actually means and how we overcome some of the regulatory hurdles, and then augment that with the tools that we now have within the contact center industry. Isn't that a great thing?
Yeah.
So start with wanting to be audited.
And you know what? I think the stat that I saw recently was that 70% of customers would look favorably on a brand that proactively reaches out to them to help them do things.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes firms or contact centers shy away from that because they don't necessarily know what regulatory standpoints that they should be working to. So when you're looking at an existing customer base, Bruce, does that regulation change slightly in terms of the flexibility that you've got to be able to contact your existing customers more proactively?
So, you know, obviously the financial industry is a lot more regulated. Anything to do with, you know, debt collection, you know, has a lot more, regulations applied to it. So, you know, we see that within the banking sector where we're very heavily, you know, we've got a very large customer base. I mean, I think we've got 9 of the top 10 banks. So that is heavily regulated. And now I think, you know, Gary, you and I were discussing it yesterday. There's now an onus on the customer to also start proactively reporting on their adherence, you know, to these different legislations. So, you know, it's about, you know, so if we look at the financial sector, I say that is one of the most heavily regulated. But then that applies across, you know, if you're in retail or if you're in utilities, whatever it is. So there's certain elements within each vertical that is more regulated than others. There's like baselines like Ofcom and things like that, which apply across everyone when you're doing proactive outreach. So I would say, you know, there is certainly in the UK, you know, in Euro has also got GDPR. If you go into Germany, for example, it's like GDPR but on steroids. So, you know, in Germany, you can only contact somebody for, you know, for sales if they've opted in, and they've specifically opted in for that specific service, and they've contacted you before. You know, on the debt collection side, you can only contact somebody once a judgment has been passed in court, which is different to here. So,
way down the line.
Yeah, so it varies.
It's interesting you say that because, like, if we look at UK, for example, I was talking to a client in the industry just a few days ago who had a council tax demand because they happened to change bank accounts and the direct debit wasn't collected correctly.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even a demand. It was literally like, okay, you're off to court. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, guys. We talk so much around this human touch, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be. But how do I want my citizen to feel when that kind of thing happens. It's a customer journey that I can think about and what outcome I want in that Gov example. And they're the kind of things that can make such a difference. You know, when people are busy enough, worried enough, you know, data coming in all over the place. So if we're a bit more human and a bit more personalized and use the things that we have, surely that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I want it to genuinely have a good outcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think
it is outcomes, isn't it? Go on, Bruce. What do you say?
Sorry, I'm getting excited about this now, and
and
again, it comes back to mapping those journeys, because how much did it cost to generate and do all of that to send somebody a notice that they're going to court, when it could have just flagged in the system, let's give this person a call. If they don't answer, send them an SMS, just say, we see that you've missed this.
Reason direct debit wasn't collect. Yeah, exactly.
And then, you know, you can respond back, and you know, with all the neat stuff you got with the NLU and everything else, you can pick that. Okay, fine. And then you can apply you know, the appropriate outreach campaign to get that sorted out, rather than to go through the whole process of then now you've got a really unhappy customer. Now you've got to go through all the back and forth. They've got to try and contact the council and find out who it is, which will most probably be in various different departments. So again, it comes back to understanding those journeys and the costs associated. Like there is
massive.
You know, a simple call I bet you could have fixed that.
And I think Marianne says some of the points that you've raised there, Bruce, really, really well, in terms of the importance of data, the cost of data, the tech being an enabler of customer experience, and how you can, if used wisely, it can be awesome. And Martin, as you mentioned earlier, has also raised a really good point in this, and I'm interested to get your views on what you think some of the myths are, Bruce. So Martin says here, the most significant barriers that we have to overcome is the misplaced myths associated with outbound. I'm interested, Martin, what you think those myths are, but when you James and Bruce, what do you think are maybe some of those myths that people associate with outbound, to Martin's point, that we might need to try and overcome to get people thinking more proactively?
And I think, you know, I think Martin has summarized it quite well there, but we were actually discussing it yesterday. I think it comes in the terminology that we use. Even as vendors selling our product, we talk about a dialer. Dialer immediately brings up, you know, the vision of the outbound calls,
Factory hens,
you know,
chicken away.
Yeah, there are so many bad actors in the market where you've got spam callers and you've got everything else. So how do you differentiate yourself? And again, this is where we need to get away from talking about a call, and we need to call it an outbound interaction. So proactive outreach, you know, is an interaction. Doesn't necessarily have to be a call. Might start with a call, and then, you know, if the person doesn't answer, it's an SMS. Then they see, you know, why you're calling them, the value it could add. Then they can choose whether they can then schedule a call back. So you can click on that, and that can then, you know, that can get an agent on the phone. But I think that it's absolutely, I was talking to a friend of mine, funnily enough, and you know, we've been friends for 20 something years, and I've been in this job for 3 and a bit years, and we'd had quite a few beers, and he was like you actually have to explain. I know. He's like, you have to explain to me what you guys actually do. So I was trying to explain to him about proactive. He's like, yeah, basically nuisance cold callers. And it took me like an hour to like find a scenario which actually made him understand where there's benefit in this. Because he's like, I don't want to be contacted. I don't want to, like, just send me a renewal. I don't want to. And then I explained, like, well, what if by contacting you we're able to save money on your renewal, or your I say cell phone, very South African of me, your mobile phone contract. So there is that myth, but I think the stat itself says that 70% of people, I think we've got a stat that comes from the US, that is 82% of people look more favorably on, you know, on organizations if they do that proactive outreach. So yes, we have to dispel that myth, but I think that comes in the language we use and how we execute that outreach campaign. And again, I say it again, I know I sound like a stuck record. It's meeting the customer in the channel of their choice at the time of their choice. And then that builds trust. So once you've got that brand loyalty, that trust, that you know, and also that brand reputation, people know if they're getting a call from a particular vendor that it's going to be because of the positive sentiment around it, that it's going to be a call that they want to take, or an interaction that they want to have. So I think that's,
you said it earlier, James. You said it. Surprise me, delight me. And I think that needs to be part of every contact center strategy is to say, right, how do we surprise and delight our customers
Culture
with
of care.
proactive intent
Culture
and
of
have that
care.
culture
Yeah.
of care. And from your perspective, James, just thinking about kind of some of the points that Martin's raised there about busting myths and changing mindsets, what would you say to Martin there about how Zoom can approach that in kind of a different way?
Yeah, we want to help. We want to dig into actually the conversation. Bruce and the team at Alvaria, they're absolutely incredible. I'm not saying actually on the call. I'll evangelize about things I actually believe in rather than just saying it for the sake of it, because they understand what it means to do the outreach. Yeah. I want to make sure that I'm empowering my agents, that I'm setting people up for success, that I'm able to show analytics and data following those conversations that are meaningful and that are going to help my business understand the relevance and how important it is to have that function within my organization. And then, again, spend X million on Salesforce. Wouldn't it be great if I could start tying all these data points together about that outreach, that outbound contact, what that meant to my next level of sentiment, the next time I bought something, the next time even somebody that I knew had gone and bought something because of a recommendation from a customer. Yeah. That's brilliant. And it isn't cold call. Cold call's just, it's like getting up to turn the television over and then before remote controls or whatever. Totally different. We're miles away from that. We've got to show and evangelize about how we can help people as contact center agents and also customers and businesses really achieve what they're looking for. So going for that win-win, going for the yes, I want to be audited, and doing it with the right intention.
Absolutely. And Marianne supports your comment there about the myth around It's not just about the sale and cold calling, it's being more proactive. But what I want to get to, and you started touching on it there, James, and I'm gonna start with yourself in terms of the measuring the impact in the contact center. We are all about what's the ROI, what's the impact, what's the thing that we need to be on the hook for to measure. And I think sometimes we avoid doing proactive stuff like outbound interactions, etc., because we can't quite clearly articulate the ROI to it. So when we're thinking about measuring the impact of proactive outreach, what do you think are some of the KPIs that matter most when we're thinking about how we measure the success of proactive loyalty strategies?
Yeah, well, for me, it's all down to engagement and sentiment. So, I mean, again, and this is what am I talking about? What do I want the customer? What would I like to the customer to talk about? And what's the engagement? You know, it shouldn't be a one-way conversation of even the agent assistance. That's just a guide. That's a support thing to help me achieve an outcome. And also the assumption that this is going to have an immediate outcome. I think that's a huge oversight, because it might not be that immediate outcome. So what am I doing with the data? That's what I would be saying. Is it a specific metric? I would argue it isn't. There's a collection of things there that can lead to that. So we talked about sentiment, outcome, some terminology, how we're wrapping that call up, all these different things that we can use, for example. Yeah. But I want to know 6 months down the line what's happening. I'd like to know what does that mean? You know, if I hadn't have done that, what would have happened? And I think that's incredibly powerful to actually not just necessarily reflect on a single interaction, but look at what that's actually driving. If I'm looking at these data points and I can multiply that by 2, 3, 4,000 outbound interactions that I've had, what does that mean for my business 6 months down the line if I hadn't have done it? And isn't that a great ROI model? And it isn't even ROI. It's about, well, it is, but it's about
return on experience. I think sometimes is the new phrase, isn't it?
Yes.
Bruce, I can see you're itching to add to that. So come to you.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, if we look at how do we measure this, because we get asked this all the time. So how do we, you know, how do you measure the success of an outbound campaign? And there's obviously there's NPS, CSAT, which is very important. And Gary, as you mentioned at the beginning, it's at an all-time low. You know, what we've seen with customers who have, you know, a true, you know, proactive outreach strategy, their NPS typically goes up anywhere from 10 to 15 points, which is huge, right? And because it's what the consumer base is asking for. But if we go into, you know, that's more soft, like kind of like your NPS, your CSAT. Now, if you start going into the ROI is actually not that difficult to calculate, because if you say, right, I've deployed a proactive outreach strategy, or I'm just using proactive, compliant, predictive, however we want to describe it, within the three areas, which is, you know, the proactive customer outreach, sales, collections, you can quantify that. Because if you say, right, I've deployed an outreach strategy, it's actually reduced the inbound on my contact center by 30%. Very easy to quantify the cost associated to that. If you have, then if you see your retention scores go, or your retention levels or numbers go up, very easy to quantify. Like before we deployed this, we had a churn rate of X%. We've deployed this, we've seen an average increase of customer retention or upgrade. So you can apply numbers to it. And this is why I go back to my point that outbound can be clearly defined as a profit center, because you can use it and all the metrics behind it, like with a targeted, and going back to what we're talking about, segmented. So you segment, but then you apply the right strategies, you know, regarding sales, cross sell, upsell, or even collections. You start, you apply empathy within your outreach. And what does that quantify? More promises to pay, or in sales, more sales conversion. So you can quite easily build the ROI. And if in some elements, in some areas, for me, it's easier to quantify the ROI for outbound than I think it is anywhere else, because it's like, this is where we are now. We've deployed an outreach, we put in proactive outreach, and this is where we are, in 6 months time, 12 months time.
And
so
I think it's important that you mention 100%. And it's important you mention the segmentation, because some of the things that I've seen that help build the business case for more proactive outreach is when you've clearly segmented the customer base, and then you're creating a campaign, but you're also creating a control cell that isn't going through that same journey. So you can measure one particular tranche of customers against another tranche of customers, and demonstrate either positive retention, positive growth, and gives you that business case to be able to tell the rest of the business, those that didn't go through it have done this, those that did this, so let's do more. And it just helps give that confidence and reassurance that the actions that you're taking are actually having a positive impact against a control group. We've probably got time for maybe just one or two more questions. So I'm just going to look through my list, and I'm going to come to this one, James, because you talked about this before about empowering agents. And I think that's a really important part in terms of how do we empower agents to drive loyalty. So what role do you think agents play in delivering proactive service to customers, and how do we enable them to turn that outreach into a more deepened relationship?
They're the heartbeat of it, the absolute heartbeat, gold dust of your organization, without question. So your agent, well, customer journey, agent, supported by technology, whether that's agent assistance or being prompted correctly about who you're actually talking to, why you're talking to them, with the skills that we have around empathy and building relationships. That's so powerful. But when I'm signing on to work my shift, I want to be a supported agent. I want to have the information. I want to be connected. I want to feel like I'm actually delivering something on behalf of my organization. And if you can get to that and get that hearts and minds of my team and my people, that is the complete key to this. We've got to focus and put an agent lens on a lot of this stuff, without question.
Definitely. And Bruce, how do you see technology supporting that agent in delivering that?
So I really echo James's comments about these agents are the core, and I think, like, if you look at a collections agent, for example, if you can do that, you can do any job, because you just think of how many calls you make. It's a very sensitive subject. So when we talk about the technology, I think there's a couple of elements. It's making sure that the agent is always empowered with the right information to have the right discussion at the right time. I think that's key. But then I think we also need to look at other elements, and this is where we've got people that we work with in the industry, which is around understanding when agent burnout, because it's very real when you're on the phone and you're making all these calls. How do you identify? And you can use this, you can track this with with the Zoom platform. You can pick up the sentiment. You can pick up immediately and flag that an agent might be a bit frustrated or has just come off a very difficult call. So you see that agent's come off a call. You then say, right, you need 15-minute break because you've come off a very difficult call. So I think there's two elements. It's one, empowering them with the right information, which is like their complete 360 of the customer, but then also the agents as individuals, as humans. Like, You know,
Yes.
it's a very stressful job. We need to make sure that we acknowledge that, and that we, you know, that we support them, because otherwise you just have churn, right? And the worst thing for a contact center is churn. So if you're not providing a, you know, a workplace which acknowledges the stresses that you have as a contact center agent, and then, you know, providing the kind of boundaries that or kind of guardrails to prevent burnout, to prevent all the associated, which people then end up just voting with their feet, right? They leave, and then you've got to bring somebody else in, and you've got to train them up, and then, you know, we all know the challenges that come with that. So we've got to kind of look at it in two ways. One, giving the agent all the information for them to efficiently do their job, but also understanding them as humans and individuals, and being able to support them so that they are always able to give their best, but understanding that sometimes they need a timeout. Sometimes they need to, you know, they might need to, now's a good time for them to go on some training, or, you know, reward them, like, you've been through X amount of calls, you know, why don't you have a day off? Or, you know, so there's lots of different things you can do within your shifts and your scheduling, and that, I think that's more, you know, on the workforce management side, but it all comes from the data that we have of how the agents
Bruce,
are
I'm gonna have to time you out now,
right.
because we've reached the top of the hour,
Right.
and we could probably talk about this for at least another hour, but
Easily.
we sadly do have to stop. But James, I want to say massive thank you for joining. Bruce, huge thanks for you and your team joining too. I know there's been a lot of work in the background to kind of get this live, so really appreciate it. And thank you very much to everybody who's commented in the comments. It's been alive and a buzz with some lots of ideas and suggestions. I'm going to ask James and Bruce to stop on for 60 seconds more, but for everybody else, I'm going to say thank you very much, and see you after the summer break. Take care, folks. Take care. Bye. See you soon.
Thank you.